Hey everybody, this is Tom, and this is Fear Porn. Welcome to Fear Porn. We're going to be talking this week about the invasion of Gaza, and I'm going to give you guys a quick little recap on the controversial history of what really happened on October 7th, and also the funding and creation of Hamas. Today I had an hour-long discussion with a friend who is in Israel, who was a medic for the IDF in Lebanon, fighting Hezbollah. Next week, we're going to have a much more serious interview, but I'm going to be sharing some of that. He's share his testimony, and his mother also hopped in for the discussion. And I really think that it's important that we understand the parallels between what the American government has done with their wars, and particularly in the Middle East, and also what's happening currently in Gaza and in the West Bank. So let's go ahead and kick it off here. And welcome to Fear Porn. All right, so this week, the IDF has invaded Gaza City proper. Their soldiers have made their way into Gaza City. They have a massive tank gathering, and I'm going to show you guys a little bit of that footage right now.
Sunrise over Gaza City, and the sound of Israeli surveillance drones is constant. Searching out what the Israelis claim are the final strongholds of Hamas. The 401st Brigade has begun to move in, returning to areas supposedly conquered in previous operations, but, say the Israelis, also extending into areas not previously attacked. Tanks, jets and drones are pounding the suburbs of Gaza City ahead of a more significant troop advance, threatening to destroy what's left here unless Hamas releases all its hostages after almost 700 days in captivity. And though Israel wants 1 million or so Palestinians to leave, many are still refusing.
The situation is as you can see. We are under fire. We won't leave. We are staying in their faces. God willing, we will remain here.
But thousands have begun heading south, their lives quite literally on their backs, heading towards the camps they fled to during previous offensives, with no ceasefire to make their journey through a war zone any easier. This coastal road may be a safer route, civilians fleeing past sun-kissed beaches in panic from the increased tempo of explosions. Hamas fighters are likely to be hiding amongst this traffic, potentially allowing them to fight another day, and if so, withholding from the Israelis the outright victory their government claims it can achieve. Which is why this build-up of tanks may be in part about Israeli politics, about persuading hardliners not to topple Israel's ruling coalition by leaving it. A call-up of 60,000 reservists will bring the total to 120,000. The Gaza City operation against military advice, with commanders warning that it will exhaust the troops and endanger the 20 or so living hostages.
Okay, also, I'd like to mention that there was massive protests in opposition in Israel in opposition to the actual invasion of Gaza. Really, the writing's on the wall here. As somebody that's been following this conflict and also doing research as to what the Greater Israel Project is, and also Netanyahu's attempt to stay out of political trouble, pending a corruption charge that is likely to affect him as soon as this conflict is over. Anyways, let's continue on here. So I want to give the people of Israel a bit of credit here. Many of them do not support what is happening currently in Gaza.
It could also further endanger the lives of these Palestinians. Gaza's famine is at its worst here in Gaza City and north of it. The latest UN estimate is that more than 500,000 people are starving.
We came to this charity kitchen because there is no distribution of aid. Either that or we don't receive it. People steal it and sell it in the markets. We have no home left, no food and no income.
Israel calls its offensive gradual, precise and...
Okay, one thing also I plan on getting into pretty soon here is there is some articles that I've seen, and I need to gather them, that basically their assertion, and I'm not sure how strong the evidence is here, is that Israel and the IDF are arming and funding gangs that are not Hamas within Palestine that are stealing the food and selling it in the black market so that they could say it's Hamas. Now this, until I can get a hold of these news articles, this is not something that I am sure is actually true. However, I wouldn't put it past them if you consider the history of what's going on, and we're going to explore a little bit why the credibility of Israel right now in the international scene is absolutely at an all-time low.
targeted, but not precise or targeted enough to stop this 9-year-old boy being taken for burial this morning. The houses are gone, everything's gone, and now my son is gone, says his father. These mourners in Gaza City might well privately curse Hamas for fighting amongst them, but in public they curse Israel more, with the Israeli ground assault expected to begin in earnest in a few weeks' time.
Well, earlier I spoke to Dr. Ahmed.
Okay, also she did an interview with a doctor there. We're going to be going into that and what's going on with the starvation. As of right now, there's an estimated 500,000 people there that are at the brink of starving to death. We'll get a little bit further into that momentarily. So let's talk about what happened on October 7th again. I think it's important that we do a recap on this. I plan on showing this episode to my friend and having him watch this before we have our next interview. So I'm kind of gathering and collaborating with him on the discussion topics, and I'm going to show him this interview. Let's go into it. I'm going to be doing the subtitles. Okay, 6:30 in the morning. By the way, this is an IDF soldier, okay? This IDF soldier has testimony that he gave just about 3 weeks ago, stating that he was told to stand down on October 7th. Now, we've heard this a lot, and a lot of people have had their suspicions as to how it is that the most guarded, secure, high-tech border on planet Earth, even my friend during our interview had said, if a bird landed on that fence, we would know about it, and there would be soldiers there. They had been told to stand down this day. So let's take a listen here. 6:30 in the morning on October 7th, you're at the output.
6:30 בבוקר, 7 באוקטובר, אתה במוצב.
For us, October 7th starts before 6:30.
לפני 6:30,
I was a soldier in the mortar platoon of the Golani Brigade, 18th Battalion.
אני הייתי לוחם במחלקת מרגמות בגדוד 13, גולני, ובאותו לילה
And that night, myself, Yotam Sarur, my sergeant Tamar ben Yehuda, may he rest in peace,
אני, יותם סור, הסמל שלי תמר בן יהודה, זיכרונו לברכה, שלושתנו עושים לילה
the three of us were pulling an all-nighter.
לבן. הרשינו לעצמנו
On Sabbaths and holidays, we'd let ourselves pull an all-nighter until the dawn stand to.
בשבתות וחגים במיוחד, לעשות לילה לבן עד לכוננות עם שחר,
And you know, we in the mortar platoon have time to sleep until the next stand to.
יודעים, יש לנו זמן לישון, מחלקת מרגמות, עד לכוננות הבאה. אז
So at 5:20 a.m., we're sitting by the radio so as not to wake up the radio operator.
5:20 בבוקר, אנחנו יושבים ליד הקשר כדי לא להעיר מאזין,
And my deputy battalion commander near Boinfield, who was also seriously injured, and thank God he survived.
שלי, ניר בוינפלג, שגם הוא נפצע קשה, וברוך השם הוא שרד.
And suddenly gets on the radio with a strange message.
בקשר, בהודעה מוזרה. כל התחנות,
All stations, I don't know how, I don't know why. Something along those lines.
לא יודע למה, לא יודע איך, משהו בסגנון הזה. אין סיור בגדר.
No patrol on the fence until 9 a.m.
עד 9 בבוקר.
What time is it then? 5:20 in the morning, he says.
5:20 בבוקר.
Here's a recording of it. All stations are to hold their positions. So in terms of ground forces and Orev, we don't have anything significant. The brigade issued a directive for our forces pending a situation assessment until 9 a.m. I'll say it again, until 9 in the morning, pending the situation assessment. We're in the rear staging areas. A brigade level arrangement. I don't know exactly why. I don't ask too many questions. That's the directive. That's what we do. A little before it all begins. By the way, this is the recording right here. This recording is the reason it got leaked. And after that, he came forward, the soldier came forward, and felt safe enough to be able to disclose a corroboration of this stand-down order. A little before it all began, and the Tomar gives us this look like, what? And you know, we're simple soldiers, just combatants. Not commanders or officers who can ask questions. It's an order from the deputy battalion commander. We take the order and we don't ask questions. A routine passing of an order. And sure enough, an hour later at 6:30, suddenly, sirens. I'll tell you the truth. I've been living with this since the October 7th. I was very afraid to talk about it. And when I got to the Knesset, it was after a period when I asked some senior army officers, what actually happened there.
שם. והיו כאלה שבהתחלה
And there was some who initially told me,
אמרו לי, תשמע,
listen, there was a sniper threat from the Nakba on the fence.
יום צליפה של נ"טים על הגדר, לכן לא רצינו
So we didn't want to send soldiers
לשלוח חיילים, כדי שלא ייפגעו.
so they wouldn't get hit.
ואז עם
And then over time, it kind of dawned on me.
הזמן קצת נפל לי האסימון, ואמרתי, רגע, אם יש
And I said, wait, if there's a sniper
יום
threat,
צליפה, איך יכול להיות
how can it be that I, who am only 200 meters from the fence,
שאני סך הכל 200 מטר מהגדר, לא יודע שיש איום.
don't know about it? How can it be that my friends are fighting without a vest
יכול להיות שחברים שלי נלחמים בלי וסט, עם תחתונים
in their underwear and socks,
וגרביים, ואף אחד
and nobody knows that something is
לא
happening?
יודע שיש משהו, אנחנו סך
We're only 200 to 300 meters from the
הכל
fence.
200-300 מטר מהגדר. ואז זה עוד
And then that was when, that was on my mind again.
הפעם ישב לי בראש, ובאמת,
And really, I was suddenly invited to the Knesset.
הזמינו אותי פתאום לכנסת. הרגשתי שזה
I felt that this was the real opportunity to open this subject
ההזדמנות באמת לפתוח את הנושא הזה ולדבר עליו
and talk about it and to actually understand what happened there.
ולהבין בעצם מה קרה שם. והנה, את אומרת, כמו שאת אומרת,
To a lot of people, it sounds strange.
הרבה אנשים זה נשמע להם תמוה, ומה
And what actually happened
בעצם
there?
קרה שם. ואנחנו עוד פעם חוזרים לזה,
And we were going back to think about it. And I'll be honest, Hila,
ואני אגיד לך את האמת, איילה, אנחנו
I've been living with some kind of hole in my brain
חיים איזשהו חור במוח, מאז ה-7
since October 7th.
באוקטובר, שמשהו בלב
That something in my heart
מרגיש לי
feels to me that,
אני לא יודע מה
listen, I don't know what was there.
שם, לא יודע מה יש
I don't know what it was. I want to understand what happened,
שם, אני רוצה להבין מה קרה, כמו כולם.
like everyone. Look, the deputy battalion commander wasn't a sniper threat.
גד לא היה איום צליפה, כי הסמג"ד
Because the deputy battalion commander says, I have no idea why.
אומר אין לי מושג למה, ולא למה, ואיום
And a sniper threat happens many
יש
times.
הרבה פעמים.
He says this in real time
הוא אומר את זה בזמן אמת, ב-5:20
at 5:20 in the morning.
בבוקר, הוא לא,
It's not like someone told him to say that.
מישהו אמר לו להגיד ככה, הוא קיבל,
He received an order. It's not like no one told him to say that. He received an order without an explanation.
בלי הסבר. וזה,
Okay? These subtitles are very fast. They're hard to read. You guys could get into that and do some more research yourself. If you don't believe me, you could look up these testimonies that were given by IDF soldiers that, once again, were told to stand down on October 7th. Okay? Very interesting. Also, let's get into a little bit of the history of Hamas. Here is an interesting interview, or not an interview, but a testimony in Congress on January 9th, 2009, by none other than the legendary Ron Paul.
I rise in opposition to this resolution, not because I am taking sides and picking who the bad guys are and who the good guys are, but I'm looking at this more from the angle of being a United States citizen, an American, and I think resolutions like this really do us great harm. In many ways, what's happening in the Middle East, and in particular with Gaza right now, we have some moral responsibility for both sides in a way, because we provide help and funding for both Arab nations and Israel. And so we definitely have a moral responsibility, and especially now today, the weapons being used to kill so many Palestinians are American weapons, and American funds essentially are being used for this. But there's a political liability which I think is something that we fail to look at because too often there's so much blowback from our intervention in areas that we shouldn't be involved in. You know, Hamas, if you look at the history, you'll find out that Hamas was encouraged and really started by Israel because they wanted Hamas to counteract Yasser Arafat. And you say, well, yeah, that was better then and served its purpose, but we didn't want Hamas to do this. So then we as Americans say, well, we have such a good system, we're going to impose this on the world. We're going to invade Iraq and teach people.
Think about that. This is in 2009, okay? Israel was instrumental in the creation of Hamas. Okay? They needed a radicalized enemy to prevent the two-state solution from actually happening. I'm gonna let him finish, and I'm gonna show you guys something else interesting that kind of ties this in to it actually being more of a long-term goal for them.
To be Democrats. We want free elections. So we encourage the Palestinians to have a free election. They do, and they elect Hamas. So we first, indirectly and directly through Israel, help establish Hamas. Then we have election. Then Hamas becomes dominant, so we have to kill them. You know, it just doesn't make sense. During the 80s, you know, we were allied with Osama bin Laden. And we were contending with the Soviets. It was at that time our CAA thought it was good if we radicalized the Muslim world. So we financed the madrasa schools to radicalize the Muslims in order to compete with the Soviets. There's too much blowback. There's a lot of reasons why we should oppose this resolution. It is not in the interest of the United States. It's not in the interest of Israel either.
All right. So there we go. There's that. Now,
I rise in opposition to this resolution.
Now, I want to break this down for you guys a little bit and show you guys some other really interesting stuff.
So we told you that Benjamin Netanyahu is very unpopular in Israel, that there are hundreds of thousands of people protesting in the streets before this attack happened.
This is from 2003.
What we also find out is that Hamas was invented by Israel. Why? Because there was the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, and they were moderate and they were secular. Well, so Israel's idea was, hey, let's make this radical, a religious extremist organization, and they'll split the Palestinians. And so divide and conquer is much easier than trying to conquer a united Palestine. So they, listen, here it is. Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment, this is from Haaretz.
So, if you have a radicalized Hamas-led Gaza as a major component of the two parts of Palestine, it is very easy to sell the narrative that we've tried to give these people a place. We've given them land. We gave them beautiful land on the shore, and they just don't want to live in peace with us. And that might be, but a major component of that brainwashing, of that radicalism, if we call that, which I do believe, I'm not in support of Hamas. I think they're a radicalized group, no different than Al-Qaeda and ISIS, okay? They're a boogeyman created so that the people of Israel have an enemy there, so that they could justify doing exactly what they're doing right in this moment. Let that sit in. This plan has been brewing up for a long time, and now we're seeing the fruition of the planning of this whole thing. The problem is that everybody could see the truth. Well, I'm not going to say everybody. I'm going to say most of us could see the truth as to what's going on. Now, I feel empathy. I genuinely feel empathy for my brother Aviv. And for the people of Israel that have been sold this narrative and have also seen the radicalized nature of the people of Gaza, but they're not seeing the big picture. Or maybe they choose not to see the big picture. That's really the question that we need to be asking ourselves right now. Let's take a look, and let me read this quote for you again one more time. I think he's going to read it anyways. Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. Netanyahu told his Likud party's Knesset members in March of 2019, 10 and a half years after Ron Paul stood in opposition in Congress. This and so much more, you could see that under the Netanyahu regime, millions of dollars were funneled through Qatar, and Israel had facilitated that to Hamas. Okay? All smoke and mirrors. All smoke and mirrors, my friends. And it's important that we have this discussion so that we can understand what's really going on.
Oh, okay. So this is from a site. It says, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestine state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. This is what Netanyahu told the Likud party's Knesset members in March of 2019. This is part of our strategy. Well, first, let me say, great job.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did
Okay, there it is, right? I think that pretty much says it all, right? Okay? And you guys could do more research on all of this sort of stuff. So, we know that also you could do research on this. Egypt and military officials had also warned that activity was taking place in Gaza, that they were amassing militants, and it seemed like they were planning something big. Okay? Some people have the specifics of the date. There's a New York Times article that is being discussed in this Jimmy Dore piece. Anybody wants any of this stuff, feel free to ask me. I could send you guys more stuff on this. They'd known about this attack coming for a considerable amount of time. So there was a planned, coordinated stand down, similar to that of, let's just say, I hate to say this, but this is a fact, that the American military, though the soldiers didn't know, they had known that Pearl Harbor was going to take place. They were warned by Japan prior to the attacks, and they had moved two of their biggest aircraft carriers, had left Pearl Harbor prior to the attack, leaving the remainder as sacrificial lambs necessary to get the popularity of joining World War II. Because isolationism was a very big part of American culture during World War II. After World War I, of course. So, there's a little brief history, a little brief breakdown. They stood down, they funded Hamas, okay? And then during October 7th, perhaps the darkest part of this entire thing is a thing called the Hannibal Directive, which I invite anybody here, if you haven't heard of the Hannibal Directive and you don't believe me, please feel free to have a conversation with me about this, because I think it's extremely important that we dismantle propaganda regardless of who that hurts, who that benefits. We need to be searching as humans trying to live in a world of peace and diplomacy. We need to be searching for the truth. Regardless, the truth is the most important thing. So, let's talk about the Hannibal Directive.
Cars, blacked and charred bodies, and incinerated homes in southern Israel were plastered on every phone screen and television after the October 7th Hamas attacks. The images and videos were used by the Israeli government to justify the military's heavy-handed tactics in their ongoing war against Hamas. But were they actually the result of the Hamas attack? Well, surely Israeli civilians were brutally killed by Hamas on October 7th, but there's mounting evidence that we think any responsible journalist needs to examine. Let's take a look at something called the Hannibal Directive. I'm investigative journalist Ben Swan, and this is Reckoning, Israel and Gaza. So far in this investigative series, we have discussed how Israel had received concrete and credible intelligence from foreign intelligence agencies, their own military, and even Israeli citizens about where and when the October 7th Hamas attacks would take place. The military rammed through the approval of the Nova Music Festival at the last minute, despite pushback from people within the army, and even threatened legal action against soldiers who tried warning and preparing for the Hamas attack. And when the attack began, what did the military do? Well, nothing. Evidence we've uncovered points to there being some type of military stand down at the beginning of the attack. But we need to take a look at another crucial aspect of that day. When the IDF began to finally use their firepower and military to engage Hamas in southern Israel, did they exclusively target enemy militants? Well, evidence actually points to no. To understand what the Israeli military did to their own civilians on October 7th, you have to understand the political aspirations of Hamas and what the goal of taking hostages is: political leverage. There are over 10,000 Palestinians in Israeli jails, 3,000 of whom have not been to trial or charged with a crime. When militant groups manage to capture Israeli civilians or soldiers, it gives them leverage to force a prisoner swap and to get some of their people out of Israeli prison. For example, in 1986...
I just want to take a moment and let that sit. Let that sink in for you guys. At the time of October 7th, there was 3,000 Palestinians in prison in Israel being held without trial, without being charged whatsoever. Okay? I don't care what country, if they're our ally, if it's our country. I stand with basic principles of justice. Okay? And that means that if you are going to arrest somebody, whether that is testimony, witness testimony, physical evidence, whatever it is, you charge them. You charge them and you give them a trial. That is basic human fundamental right. Okay? And at this time, 3,000 Palestinians were locked up without trial, without charges. Okay? So this is a major component as to why Hamas was taking hostages. Now back to the talk.
Hamas managed to kidnap 3 Israeli soldiers and bring them into Gaza. They demanded 1,150 Palestinian prisoners in return for those 3 soldiers. Well, after this, the military drafted a secret field order to prevent future kidnappings. It was called the Hannibal Directive. The directive gets its name from the Carthaginian general who chose to poison himself rather than allow himself to be captured alive by the Romans. Back in 2003, again, strangely enough, October 7th, 2003, 3 Israeli soldiers were taken hostage and brought into Lebanon. Following the activation of the Hannibal Directive, IDF attack helicopters fired indiscriminately on 26 vehicles, thus ensuring the death of their own soldiers and therefore robbing Lebanese militants of the ability to demand Israel make concessions. The last known application of the Hannibal Directive was 2014 in Rafah. Hamas fighters managed to capture an Israeli soldier, Lieutenant Haydar Golden. Instead of allowing the lieutenant to be used as leverage by Hamas, though, the military killed him, dropping bombs, missiles, and shells on the area he was being held, killing that soldier and also 100 Palestinian civilians. The scale of the Hannibal Directive on October 7th was entirely different, though, from those of the past. A retired Israeli Air Force general, Nof Erez, described it during a podcast with Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper, saying this, quote, "The Hannibal Directive was apparently applied at a certain stage because at the moment they understand there is a kidnapping, they immediately say, guys, this is a Hannibal. But the Hannibal we trained for all of the last 20 years is for a vehicle we know at what point the fence it enters, on what side it drives, maybe even on which road it drives. This was a mass Hannibal." Now think about that term, a mass Hannibal. We all know the Hannibal Directive means to kill your own. So what does mass Hannibal mean? Well, if you look at Israeli media, you're going to find some pretty interesting things. Let's read this quote directly from Ynet, a large mainstream Israeli media outlet. Quote, "In the week after Black Shabbat, October 7th, soldiers of elite units at the initiative of the Southern Command checked about 70 vehicles that remained in the area between the Otaf settlements and the Gaza Strip. These are vehicles that did not reach Gaza because on the way there, they were shot by a combat helicopter, an anti-tank missile or tank, and at least in some cases, everyone in the vehicle was killed," end quote. 70 vehicles. And in some cases, everyone in the vehicle was killed. These are Israelis killed by Israel. Again, only reported on in Israeli media. Here in the U.S., we keep seeing pictures repeatedly of cars burnt to a crisp as evidence of Hamas's barbarism. But was it Hamas's AK-47s and homemade rockets that burnt all these cars to a crisp? Or perhaps Hellfire and anti-tank missiles? Tuval Escapia is a member of the security team for the kibbutz Bereri. He set up a hotline so kibbutz residents could communicate with the Israeli army. He told Haaretz that, quote, "The commanders in the field made difficult decisions, including shelling houses on their occupants in order to eliminate would-be hostages as well as terrorists." Shelled entire houses. Do we hear this in American mainstream media? That the Israeli military targeted and destroyed over 70 cars with Hellfire missiles that were filled with Israelis, and that they decimated entire Israeli homes with tank shells. A report in Haaretz, October 20th, notes that the Israeli military also carried out an airstrike on their own military base. That base was filled with Israeli civil administration officers and soldiers at the time. An Israeli woman named Yasmin Porat gave an interview with Israel Radio that the military undoubtedly killed numerous Israeli hostages during gun battles with Hamas militants. Listen.
בגינה של האנשים מהקיבוץ שיש 5 בני ערובה ששוכבים או 6 על האדמה בחוץ, ממש כצאן לטבח מול הירי של הימ"מ שלנו והמחבלים.
הטרוריסטים ירו בהם?
לא, הם נהרגו מהחילופי ירי, תבין שהיה חילופי ירי מאוד מאוד קשים.
זאת אומרת, יכול להיות שזה כוחותינו ירו בהם? כשניסו לחסל את החוטפים, את החמאס?
הם חיסלו את כולם, כולל בני ערובה, כי היה שם חילופי ירי מאוד מאוד קשים. אני משוחררת בסביבות השעה 5:30, ב8:30 כנראה מסתיימת הלחימה, אחרי שהיה חילופי אש מטורפים, אפילו.
IDF General Barak Hiram, who we covered in our previous episode, prevented hundreds of troops from entering Kibbutz Bereri for hours on October 7th, when he finally allowed the IDF to go in. He ordered tanks to fire on multiple homes. The tank shells killed at least 12 Israeli hostages and 3 children. Recently, the UN published an investigation confirming several of these facts, namely that the IDF had in fact activated the Hannibal Directive on October 7th. Quote, "The Commission is aware of the allegations that Israeli special forces used the Hannibal Directive to prevent the capture of Israeli civilians and their transfer to Gaza, even at the cost of killing them." The Commission documented one statement by an ISF tank crew confirming that the crew had applied the Hannibal Directive. So to recap, the Israeli military, Israeli civilians, and the United Nations all admit to the IDF purposely killing their own on October 7th. How many? Well, that's hard to tell. Tank shells hitting homes full of people, Hellfire missiles destroying at least 70 cars, mass Hannibal, but still, on social media, if you make such a claim, you're going to be hit with a community note and then promptly linked to a bogus fact-check website. The imagery of charred bodies and incinerated cars and homes are still used to this day to manufacture consent for Israel's ongoing assault on the Gaza Strip, while more than 37,000 Palestinians have been killed. During war, all sides produce propaganda, but has Israel been offering up images of the aftermath of their own assault on...
And yes, this is quite a while ago that they were talking about this. 37,000 Palestinians. That's much higher now. We'll get into the numbers a little bit more specifically on another episode. Anyways, here it is. You consider this. These photos, these images that were used to enrage the public of Israel and enrage Americans to support the arming and funding of the IDF. Many of these images that you see are actually the result of the Hannibal Directive. Yes, the IDF themselves had caused this. And there's multiple witness testimonies of survivors that miraculously survived during this response by the IDF. And it's really a tragic, very tragic scene. I say we take another listen to this, watch the images in this last little section right here.
People, and then presenting it as something that their enemy did. We know these claims are pretty heavy. So please, fact check us and let us know if...
All right. So, IDF attacks using the Hannibal Directive after being told to stand down for several hours on October 7th, while the Hamas does an attack that they knew was going to happen, that they let happen, and that they wouldn't even be really in power if it wasn't for the strategic funding and essentially the creation of Hamas. So, as we look into all of this, my question is, do you not see the big picture here? Gaza is being invaded as we speak. They say that it's going to be left back to the people, that they just want to get rid of Hamas. They say that out of one mouth, and then out of the other mouth, they discuss turning it into a new Tel Aviv, a new utopia for Israel. Which one do you believe? Where do you stand on all of this? And I'm going to finish this out by going into an update as to what's going on with the children and the people of Gaza. Here's a doctor.
And we saw the loss of hair, we saw the alopecia, we saw flag sign of the hair, we saw nutritional edema, a lot of cases that it is talking about the serious condition of famine in Gaza. You know, we have an outpatient clinic for severe acute malnutrition. This clinic is used to receive 10 cases every day. It is working 2 days per week, okay? Saturday and Thursday. Last Saturday, they received 120 cases of severe acute malnutrition.
Wow. 120.
I visited the clinic, and I support the doctors and nurses who are working there. They were completely exhausted. They were shocked due to a number of cases. Everyone is asking for a nutrient. Everyone is afraid about his son or his boy or his girl. You know, starvation is not just the heart of the stomach for the baby. It is the heart, it is the pain of the heart for the mother and for the father. It is very, very, very painful feeling that you are unable to offer anything for your baby, and you see him is losing weight, losing muscles, losing fat. He's just a skeleton covered by skin, and you are watching while he's leaving, and you can't offer anything for him.
There it is. There it is, guys. I'm going to leave it with that today, and I will continue updating you on what's going on with Gaza now that the IDF is about to invade proper. And let's hope that the people of Israel are able to stand up to this and stop this. Because really, I don't see any other option other than the people of Israel standing up to stop this. I hope you guys have a good day, and I appreciate you for listening. Please do me a favor and share this. This is my third time recording it because I actually had some audio problems. I hope my audio sounds good now. Hope everything is good. And please do me a favor. This channel is brand new. Like, subscribe, share. And if you have any friends that you would like to show, you know, what's really going on, I think this is a pretty important episode. So anyways, this is Tom with Fear Porn, and I am grateful for you guys, and have a good night. Bye.